This episode is sponsored by James Tiffany's Shipyard Shenanigans, and if you like a bit of Glasgow humour, you like a bit of Billy Connolly, say, then this one might be for you. It's a comedy podcast, and it's available on all podcast apps. Hello, and welcome to Film Pro Productivity and Success, the podcast that helps film professionals and other creative people to live a more focused, effective, and happy life. My name is Carter Ferguson, and this is episode 114, No Good Deed Goes Unpunished. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Samuel Johnson, unquote. And today's topic is one that's impacted me quite often over the years. It has at times left me jaded and unmotivated, and it's also quite often left me saddened and confused, and it's generally brought me down and buggered up my productivity. And as one of the main aims of this show is to give you a happier life, I thought it worth a brief investigation, and it's an old idiom that I first heard on Judge Judy, of all places, because she often uses this phrase and several other truisms in her programming, and it's so far engraved in the culture today that it's even a song in the musical Wicked. But what exactly does it mean? Well, when I say no good deed goes unpunished, I'm really talking about any act of kindness which backfires on those who offer it. And thinking way back, I think I first experienced this. I used to collect Victorian costume. I was doing a lot of design in my early days, and I had an old school friend. Didn't know him that well, but he wanted to borrow a costume for an event he was going to. So I went out of my way to help the guy. I loaned him a complete, really mostly original Victorian outfit, frock coat, trousers, the lot. It really was. It was the one that fitted me. It was a great outfit. That's just 30 years ago. And I've neither seen him nor the costume since. When I do see that guy, Scott his name was, and someday I'll remember his second name. If I do see him in the street, I'll be marching him to an ATM with my hand out looking for cash. But whatever goodwill I had back then for him is well and truly gone now. Karma is the universal law of cause and effect. You reap what you sow. You get what you earn. You are what you eat. If you give love, you get love. Revenge returns itself upon the avenger. Mary Browne, unquote. Kind of straight up theft has mostly been how I've experienced the no good deed goes unpunished scenario. I hesitate to give you the number of examples where I did this because fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Well, I've been fooled time and time and time again. I don't know if it was my goodwill, if it was people pleasing or whatever, but it's led me to this list which I'm about to give you, of situations where I have lost out for trying to do a good deed for people. I directed a gunfight in a short film that starred Big Rory that plays the Hound in Game of Thrones, and this has nothing to do with him. He's a brilliant guy, but when I left, the director needed a close-up of a replica gun that I had provided for a pickup he was shooting. And with all the safety stuff there, it was a replica, it was never going to go off or anything like that, but I left it with him. And that was 25 years ago, and I've never seen it since, or him. Maybe 15 years ago, I loaned another prop gun, a broom-handled Mauser, to a play, a pie, and a pint at Glasgow's Oran Moor Theatre. Yes, I'm naming and shaming. And that never came back to me. And worse still, when I chased that one up, I was fobbed off by the theatre company, someone at the theatre company, who said they knew nothing about it. They even sounded annoyed that I'd dared to call to find out what was going on. I also loaned a meat cleaver and an original 28 days later military ID to Outpost 2's art department. Never saw them again. And when I raised it with a guy who had loaned them to in the art department, he just said he didn't know and he was no longer working on it, so he couldn't help me. So that was me out on that one as well. And that ID was worth 100 quid on its own. I loaned 2 US police belts and side-handled batons to an armourer in Glasgow that needed them for a show that he was working on, a TV show. And they never came back to me either. And I've just sent him a message asking for the return, by the way, a minute ago. This was maybe 6 or 7 years ago. But I've asked him for the return of these. But effectively, they were stolen as well. And what else? I directed fights for a pantomime at Musselborough's Brunton Theatre, and I left them 4 swords. 2 of them for the actual fight, and 2 as spares in case they had a break on stage. In case one of them snapped, you have a spare in the wings. And when they still hadn't been returned to me by the end of January, pantomimes for those in the international audience. They're like Christmas shows. They finish pretty much Christmas Day. Sometimes they'll go on a little bit further, but in January, you expect to be getting these things back. But anyway, I had to chase them up till eventually in March, they arrived at my door. They were delivered back to me. But when I checked them, I didn't check them when they were handed to me. When I checked them, I saw that one of them had been squashed so flat. This is the handle. It was a saber, like a fencing saber, you know, it covers the hand. It had been squashed so flat that I couldn't even get my fingers around the grip of the sword. They'd taken no care over them whatsoever. That's just a few examples of my doing good deeds that came back to haunt me later. And just an elaboration, I suppose, on the lending of stuff. Now, the way I do it now is, I'll get the name of the person that's borrowing it. It's not a production that borrows, it's somebody in the production, a named person. And that means that when you go looking for it, you can say, I loaned this to you on behalf of the production. Where is it? And another thing I'll say is that if they lose it, they pay me, and I set that out before they borrow it. I'll say, I'm happy to lend you this, but if you lose it, if you damage it, this is what's coming back. And I set that out as well. These are things that I should have done back then, but I've learned the hard way. Yeah, what else did I do? My friend Ross always gives an example of something that was borrowed for a play, and it was borrowed from, I think, a museum. Can't remember if it was a bit of rock memorabilia or whatever. But when it was delivered to the company that was borrowing it, the person brought it along in a case, and they put on white gloves, and they made a big show of taking it out in white gloves and placing it down. So it was loaned to them with very much the idea that this had great value. But when they came to pick it up, they didn't bother with white gloves or whatever. They just took it back. But it meant that the people that borrowed it really took great care of it. And as I say, that's the problem I face time and time again, and I just don't let people away with it anymore. But on a more personal note, I've had more than one friend turn against me over the years, in the sense that I think became no longer of use to them. I was once, this is difficult because I don't want to insult, I don't want to bring wrath down on me from the fact that I don't mention these people's names, but they get annoyed at me. But in effect, somebody's tried to steal a production company from me because they said that they felt they owned it. They didn't own it. I had started it. I had done everything. I'd paid for everything. I'd brought them into productions they'd worked on with the company. But this entitled person just felt that they had the right to take the company name and take the company. And yet I was the one putting in the accounts. It was my company. It was so bizarre. They weren't named or anything. So that was one very strange thing, and that ended them not speaking to me because they felt I had stolen something from them. Any productions I had done with them, though, that were theirs, I had done all the contracts in their name, not in the name of my company, but in their name. So I had no ownership over their productions, and they had no ownership over my productions, but they seemed to have a problem with it. And another chap I helped out time and time again. I mean, really a lot. Like, they were in trouble once, and I paid for some professional help for them. I loaned them equipment, weapons, things like that they needed for their productions. And when someone they were close to passed away, I stepped in and I took over, and I produced something they were working on. And this is someone I still count as a friend, and I really don't understand why they turned against me, other than that they felt entitled and that I wasn't giving them quite as much attention as they would have liked, I suppose. But that person is no longer speaking to me, and I honestly have no idea really why. But I think that when I withdrew my support, in the sense of what basically happened is my father was very ill. So I had bigger worries, and I didn't quite give this person as much attention as they thought they deserved at that time, and they fell out with me because of that. I'll have to go back and listen to that, see if it makes sense. But that was just another example of something that turned against me from me doing a good deed. In fact, I was accused of only phoning them when I wanted something, and that exact accusation could very clearly be levelled at them because I had got them out. There's loads more examples of stuff I did to help them out, and I won't go into it in any more detail, but like I'm still bothered right now that they turned against me for something I had done nothing wrong on. The most common thing that comes back to me these days is when I recommend someone for a casting, like let's say a high-end television show. It's happening at the moment. A high-end television show asks me for an actor that can act and who's got a good look and who can fight, but they probably don't have any lines. So that's not going to be any actor that only does speaking parts. It's effectively what they're looking for as a featured extra. So I will suggest a featured extra that can fight, that I think has got talent, looks good and all that, to that production. But will that production phone that person right away? Nope. they could sit for months on that, where this person's going, what's going on? And the people I've suggested are always very nice. But I'm stuck in the middle, not getting paid. And I've got to communicate with the person that I've suggested, because I've done an availability check on them. I've told them a little bit about the project, and they've expressed an interest in it. I've then handed that information to production. They've completely ghosted that person. So eventually I have to chase the production down and really demand that they call this person up. And it just leaves me time and time again looking foolish. And I don't like that at all. But that's the most common thing that happens to me, that, you know, I'm even at the point now where I really don't want to suggest anyone, or if I do suggest someone, I say, you need to call this guy today if I'm going to suggest them to you, and I'll hold the name back. That's actually where I've got to with this one. Anyway, let me move on. They repay me evil for good, to the bereavement of my soul. Psalms 35:12. Due to the cruelty, ignorance, or selfishness of the world or others, your good deeds or your good intentions will often result in being more trouble than they're worth. I try to help people when I can, and it's not always possible. And some people I've found are just intrinsically unhelpable. Have you found this? That some people are just completely unhelpable. But beyond that, many people just don't like being helped. And by offering them help, they will, in fact, punish you in return. Not everyone and not always, but when it happens, that's kind of hurtful. People who are given whatever they want soon develop a sense of entitlement and rapidly lose their sense of proportion. Sarah Churchwell, unquote. I've experienced cases too, and I've certainly heard of these situations where when you've always helped someone out, but for whatever reason you can no longer do it, like the example I gave earlier, that my father wasn't ill. That person never asked after me. They were so caught up in themselves, they never asked after me. My dad died shortly after that. This is how bad my situation was. That when you withdraw that service, that they will turn against you. And I think this is like an addict who is so used to getting what they want that when you can no longer provide it, whether it's money or time or advice or emotional support or whatever, they actually blame you for taking that thing away. And again, I can give an example. It's not quite an example of this, but like quite often I'll have people come to me and they'll say, will you produce my idea? And they'll have usually, not always, but usually a half thought out idea. Sometimes they'll have a full script or whatever, and they'll say, can you produce it? I want this made into a feature film. I want this made into a documentary of my life. I have that more often than you would believe. And I'm like, your life might be interesting to you, but it's not to me. But what I say to them always is, the only person that's going to have as much interest in your project that you need to produce it is you. I've got my own projects. I don't have time to take your project and bring it up to feature level and shoot it. By saying to them, the best person to produce this script is you, I have had people turn against me and say that I've somehow rebuffed them in a nasty way or whatever. I'm talking reality. I'm telling the truth to these people, that the best chance their project has of getting to where they need it to go is for them, with all their energy and passion about their own show, to take it there. But some people just don't like that. They want to do a half-assed job, and they want you to step in and do all the work for them, and they will be annoyed when you don't do it. Anyway, that's just a wee example there. But your goodwill tends to breed a sense of entitlement in some people that you've been attempting to help, and sometimes these people will become quite hostile. That's just my point. So what's the moral here? What's the real lesson in all of this? Well, firstly, I have to say that it's not true that no good deed goes unpunished. That's just a kind of cynical twist on a proverb that proves often to be true. Kind deeds and good deeds are eternal. We just perhaps need to be a little bit more cautious about how we deliver them. Aesop says that no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. And it's with that kindness that I suggest you move on from this. What I want to do though here is warn you about no good deed goes unpunished. Be warned about what I've spoken about today, and let that sharpen your reflexes. Accurate thinking is one of the cornerstones of productivity, and that high-level thinking I keep going on about should guide you when you find yourself in a situation where you're getting punished for your good deeds. So, to sum up, no good deed goes unpunished effectively means that sometimes when you try to help people, it backfires on you. And quite often, they will then try to take advantage of you or cause you trouble as a result of it. Your good deeds can lead you into trouble of one kind or another and leave you battered and bruised emotionally if not physically, as I should say, from the experience. And all of this is not good for your mental health or for your productivity. The reward of a good deed is in having done it. Elbert Hubbard, unquote. So have you ever done a good deed that has resulted in you being out of pocket or embarrassed or harassed or put down or abused? Do you find that happens often to you? If you've experienced it, then all I want you to do this week is to, as a call to action, is to consider how it might have been handled differently and what you could do in future to avoid it. And if you're jaded by the experience of something like this, settle down with the knowledge that the best portion of your life is represented by the little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and love which you have committed. In next week's show, I'm going to be talking about breaks and holidays. Check it out if you want to find out more. And let me end today, though, with some words from Jeanne Phillips, who said, "Like a stone thrown into a pond, a good deed can create ripples that extend far beyond the initial splash." Now, take control of your own destiny, keep on shooting, and join me next time on Film Pro Productivity and Success. The executive producer on this season is Christopher McPhillips, and the music that you're listening to right now is Adventures by Himitsu. You can follow the show on Twitter at FilmProProdPod or on Facebook at FilmProProductivity. And there's a full transcript of this episode on the official website, FilmProProductivity.com. There's actually transcripts of every episode if you want to check them out. But please do continue to support the show by subscribing, spreading the word, and leaving an awesome review.